Welcome everyone to this week's installment of Let's Talk Horses Life Living. My name is Sarah Watt and my dogs are in the background having a nice rambunctious time just as I press record. And this week's guest is a returning guest. Thank you for joining us again, Miss Suzy Godsey.
Thank you for having me, Sarah. I'm very excited to be here.
Good. My dogs are very excited as well. So we were talking a little bit off air, but tell our amazing listeners and viewers, where in the world are you right now, Suzy?
I'm actually in Budapest in Hungary. And yeah, so, traveling around for all sorts of reasons.
Yeah. So what sort of reasons? I want to talk a little bit about the adventure of your life. I mean, I'd love to get into a little bit about, I know when, I think we were in Costa Rica when we actually got to spend a little bit of time together, and we were talking about some of the, improvements, quote unquote, the projects you were doing at home in your property. But what other adventures are you on at the moment? What takes you to Europe? And yeah.
Well, most of the time, sorry, I think my internet just had a moment. Most of the time I do travel because I do the audio and streaming for Access Consciousness. So that's pretty much like still my main job, so to speak, a fun job where it's just all about the technical side of things. And then I do facilitate my own classes. So here in Budapest, I'm going to have an SE class, which is the body work that I do. So that's exciting. And yeah, I mean, it's very interesting because how, I don't know if you've ever tried to work with a marketing company and they always tell you, find your niche, find your niche. And I was like, what do you mean? I have so many things I love and I'm interested in, and like, I can't narrow it down to one little thing that I want to do, because honestly, I love everything that I do. And so to say, oh, I will only do this from now on, or this is this really narrow thing that I love the most. No, that doesn't work, and I know a lot of people for whom that doesn't really work. So yeah, so there's a lot of things that I'm interested in and play with. And I have a property in New Mexico that is basically in the desert. And I would love to change that back to more of a grassland property, because I know it was grassland a long time ago. And so, I'm looking at different ways to do this that are something that could be replicable by other people as well. So I don't want to, and plus I don't have the budget to throw like $100,000 on it, And I love that your dogs are like, yes, yes. In the background.
I'm trying to mute when they get loud, but I mean, whatever. They'll be part of the podcast. I don't think people will mind.
Exactly. I love it. I love it. So yeah. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, just quickly. I just want to quickly. So because I met you through Access Consciousness and the work you do with them. And I mean, I've watched you over the years. I've worked with Access. I do the same thing, my job, quote unquote, because it's like this. Every day you wake up and it's a new adventure. Who knows what's going to happen, what's changed overnight while we were sleeping. And finding your niche thing as well. I mean, I tend to like get really enthusiastic about something for a little while, and then I'm like, okay, I'm bored with that, and I'm on to the next thing. Or I have like multiple things going on at once. But I kind of feel like there's a lot of people out there who desire to have a life like that, but they sort of find themselves in the grind, like that 9 to 5 type of thing. And I just wanted to ask you, when I first started working with Access, I watched when you came into the tech role. I mean, you kind of call it that, but there's so much involved in that. And I watched over the years how you and your team developed what we deliver to people, like on telecalls, on classes. And I just wanted to ask you a little bit about like how that process has sort of unfurled in your world. Has it always just been like, because were you into tech? Was that your background at all before? No, I didn't think so.
No, I mean, I went to photography school in America, and that's how I ended up in Santa Barbara, and that's how I ultimately met Gary and Dane, because at that time they were living there, and I met Shannon O'Hara, which is Gary's daughter, and this was my first introduction to Access. And so from from that moment forward, you know, I was really, really interested. This was something I had done so many different modalities because there was so much going on in my life that wasn't working. And so I was searching. I was really searching for something greater. And when I found these tools, I was like, wow, something is different. I still get the goosebumps. Something is really different about these tools. And I really got just really like, wow, this is great. I have to keep using these tools. I have to play with this. And so I started working with Gary and Dane very quickly on the audio thing because I love technology. I've always loved technology. Even as a little kid, I loved mechanical things. I worked as a car mechanic for a while. Like I just love tinkering with stuff, you know. And so for me, it wasn't that big a step to step into that role. And so when I first came into it, there were so many things that felt so cumbersome and so like either not enough or over the top, like using certain equipment and things like that. And so I've always had this talent to kind of look at things and go, well, how could it be easier? How could it be better? How could it be this? How could it be that? And the one thing with Access that was always from the get-go was that we would never be in the same place all the time to do these classes. So it had to be something that was mobile. And then, you know, I was the only one traveling, so it had to fit into a few suitcases, you know, so these were the criterion. And so, you know, just, of course, it has expanded since then quite a lot, but it still, to me, I always look for what could work, what's easy, you know, what travels easy, what's easy to set up. And the funny thing is there are a lot of times we come to these venues and the guys that are there working there all the time, you know, the audio people, often they look at us and they go, are these these 6 suitcases do everything? What do you mean? Like, is this all you have? Is this all you're bringing, you know? And then we set up this like massive live stream and they're like, I don't think we've ever seen anything like this.
Totally. And even like, you know, how you've developed what people receive from home, like working with the platforms we use in Access, like things like Zoom. I remember when I first came to Access, remember when we had instant teleseminar as our telecalls one? And you would be like listening to Gary and you could hear like boop, 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 someone like pressing numbers on the line and then, you know, now we have this amazing setup where it's like orderly and visually amazing. Like it's, yeah. And so
I'm about to do something else, which is very exciting. So
yeah, and I know I'm always waiting for the next thing that you're going to like come up with and tell us about that you're trying out. And I know for a fact as well that certain, you know, companies whose programs we use have approached you and been like, how are you doing this? Like, how are you managing to deliver something like this with like the style of, you know, subscription or setup that we have with them as well?
Yeah. And that's been really fun because, of course, I assume that they know that this works, you know. And so when I call them and say, hey, can you help me with this? I'm a bit stuck or whatever. And they're like, but you can't do that. And I'm like, well, but I'm doing it, you know, and I have been doing it. And they're like, but you can't. No, I am. This is what I'm doing, you know. So yeah, it's very fun.
That's very cool. And with your own business, like, can you just talk a little bit about how is it that similar sort of process with what you create with? Okay, well, let me ask you this for the people out there, for our amazing listeners and viewers, what is your business outside of Access? Just if you can talk a little bit about what you facilitate, what you teach and talk about in the world.
Yeah, I mean, so many years ago, when I was traveling with Gary and Dane, you know, I touched Gary one time while we were in a taxi, and I was sitting behind him, and I touched his shoulders and his neck, and I was just working on him, you know. And he said, "Oh, this feels so good. Like, can we set up a table? Can you work on me?" And I said, "Sure." So I started working on him, and turns out this basically is an energy that he then named way later, ESSI, energetic synthesis of structural embodiment. And so I've been sort of bringing that energy out there into the world for a while now. And so this is one of the classes that I facilitate. It's a type of body work. It's, it is Access. When you said, what's my business outside of Access, and I know what you mean, outside of my technical job, and yet, nothing I do is really, as everything has Access in it, everything is Access, because the tools are so amazing. And so, to me, that's, so I do also do like talk to the animals classes. I do conscious rider sometimes, I feel like that's the class that I kind of do the least of, because there's so much other stuff going on always. And, so yeah, there is all these different things in Access that are so fascinating, because we always just look at things in a different way. And that's what I love, there's a shit ton of animal communication out there, but the approach that we have with Access is different, because we're asking questions in a different way. We're not assuming anything. We're not going from, oh, if an animal does this, that means this, and this. We're really looking at all the different possibilities with everything, and also really taking into consideration that animals have choice, that they have their own way of life and all that kind of stuff. So that's what I love, that we're different. And you know that.
Yeah. And I love what you said about Access. It's like, it's part of every part of your life. Like, it's not even, it's like the tools permeate everything. And even when you're like, I'm going great, I don't really need to use tools today or do any of that stuff, then all of a sudden you're like in this heap of shit and you're like, what happened to my life? And then you just like read a little bit out of a book, or you play some audio, or you change your trajectory and ask a freaking question. And I think for me, like today I took my puppy to a vet appointment, and even like just how different we are when you start to interact with people, because obviously I'm an animal lover, you're an animal lover. It's like something that's also plays a big part in our lives. And you go and work with or you're around other professionals or people in the same field as you, in as much as they work with animals, and just how much nobody really asks questions. Like, it's never this, like, they don't really go to this place of like question about anything. It's just, this is how it is, and if it's this, then it means this, and if it's that, and it means that. And I'm not knocking any people out there, any vets or anyone else out there, because everyone, I believe, is using the tools that they have available to them. And I just think I'm so fortunate that I found Access, because I get to take all of that stuff, and I study a lot about animal behavior, dog behavior, horses, but then I take all of that and I infuse it with the tools of Access and consciousness. And that's really what I think just takes you in leaps and bounds beyond anyone else. Doesn't make you better or worse or anything, but it just creates like so much more space in my world.
Yeah. And possibility, because a lot of people, like you say, they function from what they have learned, and a lot of times they don't see outside of that box, and that sometimes can be a problem when you're dealing with a little bit out of the box situation, which a lot of people deal with their animals too. It's a lot of times it's not in the box, and you are looking for a different way to approach it or a different way to solve it. And that's where we can be so helpful, because we will ask some questions to kind of see what else is actually going on here.
My dog's just knocked my ring light over.
Okay.
They're having a great wrestle, so there you go. And I mean, it's like when oh my goodness, when you were talking then as well, like with the whole being in the box thing as well, I think animals don't exist in any boxes. We've just for some reason put them into boxes, and I think everything that they try to show us is to kind of get us out of that box as well, of our own, if we're willing to look at it. But they're also kind of like, hey, if you want to shove me in a box and that works for you, I'm gonna, like, dogs especially are so geared to want to take care of us in a lot of ways, I think, and to do the things that, like, contribute to us. And sometimes even if they're things that you know, maybe there's bigger and better possibilities out there, but sometimes until you ask them that question, they're like, I'll just do my thing over here and you crazy people can do your thing over there. So I would love to see a world where, yeah, there was more of that place of like us tapping into what they're aware of and what they can actually teach us about things.
Yeah, totally. And, you know, that working with each other, and really also the recognition how much we actually, with the way that we're being in the world, also influence our animals. Or, you know, a lot of times we don't recognize that really our way of being has a huge impact, because the animals are pack animals. Most of the animals that we are living with are pack animals. And, you know, a pack functions from really being aware of each other. There is no, that idea of like individualism is not really part of their makeup. And so, you know, when we as a pack leader have certain stuff going on, it does affect our animals. And we really often, people don't recognize that, or they don't acknowledge how much of an impact they're having, really, I think.
Yeah, that's so cool. I love that. I hadn't actually ever heard it quite that way, and that is so true. And yeah, I think that's amazing. So can we just talk about Essie a little bit more? Because, you know, you talked a little bit about the talk to the animals, and we can dive into that as well. But because you mentioned there's, you know, a shit ton of animal communicators out there, but there's also a shit ton of body workers out there. Like these days, it seems to be like so many people, I don't know, have this profession of coming and working on your horses or your dogs or whatever that is. But can you talk a little bit about how Essie works? Like what it, yeah, I know that's like it's not a trick question, but more so.
No, I get it. Like, I love it. Thank you. Yeah. I know
I've done the classes and it's fucking amazing. And yeah, so
yeah. No, thank you. I mean, so, you know, just to be clear too, like Access Consciousness has also body classes, 3-day body classes, body process classes, all kinds of stuff that involve the body, including the bars. And so there's an incredible depth of body work that is available through the Access tools. Now, that's actually a question I get a lot, like what makes Essie, like how is Essie different from the other body work in Access Consciousness? And to me, first of all, I just want to clarify, you know, I don't see anyone saying better than the other. I just see it as different. And I love Andrew Gardella talks about like, hey, look, if you say, well, this is red and this is blue, what's the difference? How do you explain that? Well, you can't really explain it, you know, so it's a little bit like that. What if it was just different flavors, different colors, different energies that you're dealing with? One of the things that for me, Essie, is different is that my sense, and this is my personal sense about when I'm touching a body with the Essie energy, is that I engage with the other body on a molecular level in a very different way than if I run a body process. And the best way I can describe this for myself is that when I run a body process, it's like a river flowing. And when I'm doing Essie, it's like the river doesn't flow in one way. It kind of goes back and forth and swirls and has like little ripples and waves. And so there is a different way that the energy is engaging with me and I'm engaging with the body. And so one of the things that that people say a lot of times when they come to an Essie class is that they get a different sense about running body processes afterwards, and that it really starts to also open a different door for them with this particular energy. And you know, and I was laughing because it is hard to explain energy. How do you explain energy? You can't really explain it. And yet this particular body work seems to really can help with like structural things. You know, it is called the energetic synthesis of structural embodiment, meaning how you really, embodiment is how you are in this reality. And so your body also, of course, is moving in this reality, and it is very susceptible to judgments, and we all judge our bodies, unfortunately, some of us more than others, but there's a lot of judgments on bodies, and every judgment we have creates an energetic ripple in the body. And so SE can help to melt those ripples in a way, can melt that restriction, that construct that we have of judgment in our bodies. And so, yeah, it can create more freedom, more ease of movement. And that's just very simplified, but yeah, more space, really. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other thing I love about Access with everything, but especially when you start talking about things like SE and bars and body work, there's nothing in there that's like, this is going to fix that. Like, it's like, this is something that might contribute to you, but the thing that Access has taught me more than anything else that I've ever embarked on, because I was a bit like you, just constantly kind of seeking out different things. And especially this reality just really has not much about having a better relationship with your body or better communication or better anything. But I love in Access that it's about asking the question of like, what does your body know? It's like what we touched on with the animals and asking them the question of what they're aware of. It's kind of like this thing with your body. So with SE, with body processes, with bars, it's like, what if we were all willing to ask our bodies, show us the things that are going to contribute to you, show us what we can, add to our toolbox to create like that. We all really, I think, deep down desire to have a great relationship, quote unquote, with our bodies, to have ease and not live with pain and dysfunction and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, what if we were willing to ask those questions as well?
Yeah. Totally. And I think, yeah, go ahead. Sorry. No, go.
Well, I was going to say, what about SE? What about SE with animals? I know you do SE with horses. Can you just talk a little bit about like how different that is than working on people or whatever? Like, just give us a bit of a taste of that.
Totally. So, when I first started working on Gary and Dane, the one thing that I didn't recognize till way, way later was that working on their bodies was very much like working on horses and other animals. And I didn't really know what that was. But when I started working on people more outside of Gary and Dane, when I started to indulge in that, I had a really hard time with it. And I didn't know why, but the sessions didn't flow. It was hard work. People were complaining, and it was so strange. And it took me really a long time to recognize that the difference between Gary and Dane and animals and other people, most other people, is that Gary and Dane really don't have that very strange way of looking at their bodies as this really strange separate thing that they have to control, or so they are way more congruent with their energy, with their body. And so then, that's what animals are. Animals don't see their bodies as like this weird thing outside of them. And, in Access, we do talk about being and body being two separate entities, and yet we are here embodying. And yet most of us are fighting our bodies, but animals don't fight their bodies. Gary and Dane don't fight their bodies. And so my first experience, thank goodness, was with Gary. And because I think if it had been some other random person, I would have never gone any further, because it wasn't fun in a way. And so working with horses, we do the classes with horses because horses are big and they're a bit intimidating, and they're not like dogs where when you touch a dog, it most likely just rolls over on its back and it's happy for you to touch it. A horse isn't like that, a horse is a little bit more like, what are you doing? Okay, and then cats, of course, are a whole nother bottle of wax. You can't do a class with cats because they would just be like, excuse me. Anyway, so horses are great to work with. And what horses teach people is that when you are approaching an animal with an agenda, it really doesn't work. When you're coming towards an animal and you have the point of view that you want to heal them or you want to better them or any of those things, the horse will always be like, what are you doing? And it will move away from you. But if a horse is recognizing that you're just there and you have an energy to offer, that horse is right there with you. And it will really show you like, oh yeah, now touch me here, now touch me here, now do this, now do that. And it can become this beautiful dance that you won't have with people bodies as much, because people are not willing to even be that energy. You know, most people, when they come for a session, they lay on the table, and then when you say now flip over, they flip over, you know. And but horses don't have that point of view. They you know, if they feel like they should move now, then they twist and turn and stretch and do all kinds of things, and they move their bodies under your hand, and you know, all that kind of stuff. As people, we don't allow ourselves that. It would be great if we did, and I've had some people that actually did that, and it was wonderful, because their bodies were just really talking, like, okay, now this, now that. So yeah, so that's why horses really, but it does work on all animals. And I've had a lot of feedback from people using SE on all kinds of animals. And I've actually done SE on a fish before in a tank. So, you know, it's anything that has a body can receive this energy, really. So there is no limit.
I love that. And I love what you said about approaching a horse with an agenda. Like even other body workers out there, when it comes to people bodies, like even just the difference in entering a session where you're receiving, you know, a body work session of whatever kind from a body worker, and they come in with no, like, I'm not here to fix you, I'm not here to heal you, I'm just here to be an energy with and for your body. It's like that alone is so different and such a different invitation, because I think that's where our bodies actually have the chance to wake up to the things that we know, and that true place where we just get to contribute to each other, not like trying to fix each other or heal each other or find what's wrong. Like, and I'm realizing so much more and more, like, because, you know, I do like to work out, and I just joined a new gym, and it's so interesting, you know, that no one, you can't go to a gym and not have an agenda or an expectation. Well, I mean, I try not to, like, I mean, apart from moving and sort of having fun, but just perceiving everyone's world and how everything is done in order to create a result of something. Or yeah, it's very,
yeah. And the weird thing is, it's always based on some weird judgment too, you know. Yeah. And I think that's like a lot of people that go to the gym start also perceiving everyone else's judgment about their bodies. And so, you know, how cool is it that you are someone who can go in there with a totally different way of being and just having fun with what's there and playing with the body. You know, how many people actually would allow themselves to do that? And yeah, it's really sometimes sad, I guess, to see how, and gosh, you know, I am not free of judging my body yet. But, you know, that's something I do work on all the time. Like when I catch myself judging my body, I stop myself and, you know, I ask a question, or I kind of run a process or something, because I do get that there's so much more available if we were willing to work with our bodies and actually see our bodies as an ally and as a conscious ally, truly. And not this burden. You know, I see so many people seeing their body as a burden.
Yeah. And that fighting it thing that you said earlier, like I catch myself doing that too when I have a pain or my body's like, you know, if I'm like, because I'm quite an energetic person, like I tend to be quite, and then those days where my body's like, no, today we're just going to be chilled and we're going to be, you know, on the very relaxed side of things. And I'm like, I need to drink more coffee, or like, what's going on? Rather than like actually just acknowledging that my body knows a shitload of stuff, and rather than being like, okay, what are you aware of? Like, you know, and I tend to find these days that my body does that before some big stuff coming up. Like I've been sleeping a lot lately, and I mean, it is winter in Australia, and I know my body does that in winter, but we're also about to pack our house up and move, you know, 3 states away. So it's also like you realize where your body has its own set of awarenesses and its own compass to direct things, because it knows about itself too. Like this really cool space of question and yeah, that communion with your body, which is so different and so cool.
Totally. Yeah.
So let's just shift gears now over to, I'd love to just, because I was so enthralled when you were telling me about the things that you were doing on your property in New Mexico, and I just wondered if we could spend, you know, the last little while talking a little bit about like what it is. What are you doing there? What are you doing and why? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've been interested in water on the planet for a long time, and you know, this is one of those subjects that I've always, whenever somebody talks about it, when I see a show about, like, I'm always soaking in the information. No pun intended, or maybe. So
you've been hanging out with Andrew too long. No.
So, you know, because I do see water as a resource that has been a bit overlooked, or maybe not now. I mean, a lot of people are starting to talk about it, but even all the recent changes in climate and all the floods and everything we're having, you know, I see a lot of people talk about it. Oh, it's raining more. And then I've also found quite a few resources of people that are saying, no, it's not raining more. It's just the rain is no longer being absorbed by the soil. And you know, we have been doing agriculture and all of that for a long time in a certain way. And a lot of people are holding on to that because it has worked for so long, but it's actually also what has really changed the structure of our soil. And people are very slow to recognize that we need to have a different look at this. And there has been actually many people that started to do things in a very different way and paying attention to the soil health more so than what they are growing. But what can I grow to make the soil better is what a lot of those people are asking now. And the funny thing is, they are making better profits than the regular farmers, and yet still the regular farmers are looking at them like they're the devil, you know. And to me, to me that is insane. Like you said, you know, crazy insane. What is that? You know, we have so often, we're in this rut. Oh, we've been doing it for so long, this must be the right thing to do. And yet it's not working anymore. And we need to shift, you know. And so on my own land too, I was sort of wondering, well, what did this land look like before people actually really started to use it in a way of commercial, you know, commercial grazing, so to speak.
And is that what went on a lot around where you live? Is that what a lot of the farming and agriculture was? Like as in they had grazing animals on the land?
Correct, yeah. And so they would bring in cattle and they would graze the cattle. And of course, you know, I think even since the really, really olden days, like, well, at first it was like cowboys, you know, traveling along with the herds, and the herds would just move. But then at some point it became private properties and fences. And so it got smaller and smaller, and animals were being confined onto a certain size of land. And so when you do that, you start to, the animals will start to just eat the things that they like the most over and over and over. And so they're keeping certain plants that they favor really small up to a point where that plant no longer can grow, because the cow keeps coming back to it and eating it, even if it just grows a tiny bit. Well, in the olden days, you know, the animals would be driven by predators. And so they would come through, like antelope, buffalo, whatever was on the land, would come through, graze, move on, because the predators were on its heels all the time. And so sometimes an animal like a buffalo would come through a specific region once a year. And then maybe, yes, antelope would come through and maybe deer would come through, but different types of animals that also favor different plants would come through at different times. And so the land had time to generate itself. And also it had sort of this interesting way of playing with each other. And so I think Alan Savory in South Africa was the first one to really discover that on a larger scale, to really say, oh, that's what we're not doing anymore. You know, we're not allowing the land to recover, but also we're doing the grazing all in a very bizarre way that is not congruent with what the land needs. So he came up with this idea of what's now called adaptive grazing, mob grazing, all this kind of stuff. Now, part of that is to have a herd of animals that graze. Well, I only have 2 horses. So, I was like, how can I make this happen? And I travel a lot, and so I have a house sitter. So there is no way that I could ask someone to put up a fence every day and move my horses daily, which is really what they are doing. Every grazer that is now working with adaptive grazing moves their herd every day. So I can't do that. And so I just was like, okay, let me just play with this in a different way. So my horses I built fences for 5 days of grazing, approximately between 5 and 7 days. And you kind of just keep an eye on it. So that's what I'm doing right now. So I built all these fences. And so my horses are being moved every 5 days. And then I want to just observe. And I have no idea if this works. I'm not an expert. I am just playing. And so one of the other things that I do want to do is start seeding out some grasses, some native grasses. And I want to do that and see if I can also, with the way that I built the fences, I am having the horses walkway on contour, meaning I measured where is the land basically, on contour, this what it's called is like level. So I have all the walkways go on level as much as possible. And when they're not on level, I zigzag so that it's not a straight runoff for the water. And so I'm creating these pathways where the water hopefully will also pool. And I'm creating barriers behind that so the water does pool. And so I'm doing whatever I can to do some rain catchment. There isn't a lot of rain where I live. But the season is coming, and so I'm excited because I've started building a lot of little dams out of horse manure and all kinds of stuff. And I'm curious to see what this will do. And it's a long-term project. And like I said, I'm not an expert, probably the greatest idiot out there, and I'm just playing,
But that's how you learn. You just experiment with these things and gather information from people that have tried it and figure out your own way, because I guess it's also different, like you said, because you have a very small herd and you can't move them every day. So it's like adapting. Well, it's called adaptive grazing. It's like you've also adapted it to suit what you can do and go from there. And I just love when people are willing to question what everyone says. Even like the way we've farmed, like you said, for the last however since agriculture came about, basically. I mean, maybe we had it pretty good in the beginning, but then for some reason we got very crazy about separating everything and only having single crops living together, when now people are doing like this cross farming as well, where you're really growing a lot of different types of foods together, because they each provide the other with something to provide nutrients or a different way of storing water, or they protect it from certain insects, or they help with breaking things down and turning it into food and stuff like that. So it's so interesting to see how much what we were told was true in this area actually isn't true at all.
And it's not working anymore, and it's really breaking down. And even in my, like, I've seen it, like I've lived in Germany before I moved to America, and my parents still have the house, so I go visit there. And when I grew up and it rained really hard, you never saw anything flooding the road. Nothing. The water wouldn't flood the road. Now every time it rains, it floods the road. Because the water, the soil around there, there's a lot of agriculture around there. The soil can no longer absorb the water. And I mean, even if you watch some little movies like My Big Little Farm, which is a great one to watch for anyone, shows also in California where they have their farm, and they show this really big rain event. And he actually tells you exactly how many gallons of water per cubic meter or whatever he was able to retain on the property, and he shows these massive runoffs on neighbor properties where the rain created like a raging river. And on his property, it's just, you can't even see a puddle in a way, you know. So it's really interesting what healthy soil can do. And that, of course, you know, goes back into the watershed, and that's where we're getting our water from. And that's the part where I'm like, you know, I live in the desert and I do have a watershed. I have my own well, but I want to make sure that well keeps having water for me and for people after I'm long gone, hopefully too. You know, I'd like to see where the land is able to actually store the water again and not have it rage off in these big, massive rain events.
Yeah, and really like that energy of having a planet that's around and beautiful and healthy long after we're gone. You know, like so many people, I think we are where we are right now because everyone just has the foresight of, you know, one generation, maybe two, because they're handing something down to their children. But it's never this thing of like, what if I left it better than it was when I came here, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool. Oh,
yeah.
I'm going to go watch Big Little Farm tonight now, and I'm going to Google adaptive grazing, is it?
Yeah. Mop grazing, adaptive grazing. So yeah, please do, because I know you're moving to a new property, and you might want to look at that too, in terms of how you want to move your horses around on that property, because it's so cool, like, to see what that can do for the land, and also to see what all you could seed into the grasses that are already there that are beneficial to your horses, but also to the land. You know, playing with that, it's really exciting, because what I'm hoping for too is to see if once you start actually doing something like that, you really change the microclimate of this property, and then that affects, you know, the climate in general. And what I've noticed also where I live is a lot of times the rain events are around us. You know, I'm very close to Santa Fe in New Mexico, and Santa Fe gets more rain, and because of also the terrain. But I'm wondering too, like, if the microclimate on my property changes, would I actually invite more rain? This is also a question I have, and a curiosity that I have. And hopefully I get to see something like that, you know, in my lifetime. That would be amazing. And I'm not in it for the quick fix. And like I said, I'm not an expert, and I don't really know what I'm doing. I do ask questions, and I do talk to a lot of people and look at a lot of things, but yeah, still, what else is possible? So I'm excited for what you're doing there, because yeah, it's always cool, like, to see, and you can do so much even on small pieces of land. Like, you don't have to own, you know, thousands of acres to kind of do something.
Yeah. And I'm excited too, and I'm so grateful for that invitation, because it makes me want to keep challenging, well, not challenging, but keep asking about the possibilities of like, you know, what does, and the cool thing too is, like we've talked about with asking your horse's question, your animal's question, your body's question, like, talk to the land as well. Like, how much is the land aware of, like, what has it got locked in itself from, you know, the millions of years this planet has been in existence? Like, what's locked in there that we can discover through asking questions and being willing to play with energy, which is what this whole podcast has really been about, in varying degrees of, you know, hands-on body work, you know, access consciousness tools, talking to animals, talking to the land, working with the land. It's like we really have a whole language system available to us, which is this language of energy, where we can just have limitless information if we're willing to dive in and be the question, I think, really.
Totally. Yeah, I'm excited to see your land maybe one day.
Well, I'll be pinging you, and when you come to Australia next, you must come down and spend a bit of time with me if you can, and
absolutely.
Share your knowledge. And I know
think
No, but I know you're going to say that, but I think I'm like you. I just want to absorb everything that you know so I can be like, and it's so cool too, because you come to the property and you bring your eyes, your own perspective, your own awareness on things. And I think the other thing I love about being with access people, playing with access people in all these different playgrounds we play together, is that we don't give a shit that we don't know things, that we don't come from this professional background. It's like, I don't give a shit about that. I care about what you're aware of. And when the moment you step onto my land and the things that you hear it say to you, and my horses and my dogs as well, it's like, yeah, that to me is way more draw for me to learn from than, studying or doing a course in something or something like that.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, because, I guess that's really truly how we all are more or less functioning. Not all of us, of course, but it's yeah, thank you for saying that, because that's really what I do too. When somebody comes on my land, I'm always like curious to hear what they're aware of, because like you say, you get into your rut a little bit and you kind of you see it in a certain way after a certain while, instead of actually like being open all the time. So thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thank you so much for being on the podcast again, Suzy. This has been an amazing conversation, and I always enjoy talking to you and catching up with you. And is there anything you'd like to leave the listeners with before we finish up for today?
Well, one thing I would like to say is that, a lot of times we think we cannot have an impact, and you might hear Sarah and I talking about, oh, we have these properties and we can do this, and you don't. You maybe only have like a flower pot at home, and what can you do with that? I just want to encourage you to know that everybody has the possibility to create something different and to change. And one thing we all have is, where are we supporting with the money we're spending? So, maybe have a look at, what products are you buying? Where are you buying them? Where are you spending your money? And, that in itself is such a huge impact on this world. And I'm not saying stop buying from Amazon. That's not what I'm saying. But start being aware of, or maybe you should, I don't know. That's up to you. I'm just saying, like, please have a look at where are you spending your money? Where are you putting that? And that in itself can make a huge difference. And, if you start to go away from the convenience to the consciousness of it, that might change way more than you think.
I love that so much. I'm going to do that now. Now, all of a sudden, I'm straight away thinking, who am I supporting with my money? It's so true. It's very, very true, because money in this reality, whether we like it or not, it makes the world go round right now. It is the thing that sustains businesses and stuff like that. And maybe it'll change in the future if more people are willing to look at what they're doing, where they're spending their money, what they're doing with their money, and what else is possible in that arena as well. So thank you so much for leaving us with that little, stab, that little wedgie, that little thing to go and stew on for a little while. And we'll list the things that Suzy's chatted about on the podcast, so you can find out about the movies and the and the documentaries and the things you spoke about. And also, if you're in the same place as Suzy at any time, please get along to one of her classes. She also does a lot of her talk to the animal stuff online. It's one of the things you do facilitate that can be done via distance. And if you do have a pet or an animal, I'm sure you do private sessions as well, right? With people for their little critters, their little kids.
Absolutely.
I know, because I've had sessions with you before. You've helped me many times with my dogs and my horses. So thank you again, Suzy. You're truly brilliant and a gift to this world, and I'm just so grateful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sarah, and thanks for having me again. It's really, truly been a lovely conversation. And I can't wait to see your new property and visit.
Yes, me too. Thank you, everyone. See you next time.
Bye.
Bye.